What's up, guys? How's it going? This is your boy back again for another video. This time, this one's going to be pretty short. Nothing really too much to go over in this one, but just more of kind of a helpful tip than a tutorial or a guide or anything like that. This one is just about one of the comments that was left in one of the videos and a conversation I constantly have with other independents overall. Just even some signed artists and producers I've had this conversation with a couple times. Knowing your genre and not being afraid to be labeled. It's one of the biggest things I see. And the reason why I bring it up, other than just talking to that person in the comments, is because we try not to be labeled, right? We try to be unique and be different. And while all that sounds great to the masses, that doesn't work out too well. And I want to just make that clear. Like, to the masses, the music listeners, not the music creatives. The music listeners mainly know of just the main genre houses, like rock, hip hop, pop, jazz, classical, etc. It's not until you get into the subgenres where that's more for the creatives and the hardcore music fanatics that know, what the difference between certain types of tracks. For example, knowing the difference between blues and R&B. You would think that would be completely simple, but rhythm and blues are very similar. But to people who don't have an understanding of the differences in genres, they just think it's all under the same thing. Oh, it's sad music. Oh, it has a certain sound to it. Oh, it's about the blues. Like I've literally had those conversations before. But for you, knowing where your music belongs and where it goes can make a big difference in the audiences that you may or may not have. For example, when I started out, when I started making music a long time ago when I was younger, back during MySpace days, who remembers that? Yeah. I made, in my head, instrumental hip hop tracks. Was it instrumental hip hop? No, it was not. But at the time, the subgenre that my music belonged in did not exist at that time. It wasn't a big thing. So, and I make it sound like it was so long ago, but it really wasn't. When you think about your music, you think about where it belongs, you start to list a whole bunch of different things, like, especially when you're trying to be unique and be different. I'm not saying you shouldn't be unique and be different, but there are some better ways to go about it than just saying you are. So I would think about, what type of hip hop music do I like? Like, what type of instrumentals do I like? And I would get into, like, okay, I really like this type of drum. Okay, so what else can I do with that type of drum? If I'm thinking about, like, let's say trap drums, for example. Trap drums, they're awesome. I love the way they sound. I love the way the snares roll and stuff. Man, I love that. But I can't release the music of just drums. So, I got to add stuff with it. So what else goes with hip hop? You start to think about it. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe some brass would go nice. Get some jazz horns, get that, like, New York vibe, So I started thinking up some jazz horns, and I'm like, okay, this sounds good. This sounds pretty good. Okay, what else can I add to it? Let me add, like, some pianos. Let me add, like, let me add, let's see, what is it? Like a 2-5-5, if you know what that is, or a 2-5-1 chord progression. And that starts to sound nice. And I'm like, man, it sounds pretty cool. It's like, it's laid back. It's hip hop. I'm liking it. Let me ask you, is that still hip hop? Because no, it isn't. What I just described is lo-fi without the low fidelity. I mean, that's what lo-fi stands for. But if you start thinking about what really gets into the definition of lo-fi music, when you start to create it, you're taking a lot of those elements and you're putting them together. So now I've created lo-fi without the low fidelity sound, but I've taken all those elements and put them together, which can also be known as hi-fi, which a lot of people don't like. They don't use it, but high fidelity and low fidelity music, for lo-fi and hi-fi, they're pretty much the same. It's just the sound quality or the filter that you're putting over the instruments. So while I'm making, let's say, hi-fi hip hop, I'm still thinking it's just regular hip hop. So when I go to release my music, I release it as a hip hop instrumental, and I just leave it at that. Like, this is just an instrumental, and this is a hip hop instrumental track, and I'm getting 2 to 3 plays. Why? Is it because the track sucks, or because it's listed in the wrong genre? If you start doing research on your music and where you're pulling your influences from and where you're pulling your sounds from or where you're getting your inspiration or motivation, you start to see that the genres have kind of some rules to, especially when you're building off of elements that you like, that you think in your subconscious sound good. We all have a library of music that sounds good to us from when we were kids. And that's how we decipher what sounds good to us and what doesn't. So everything I listed when I was talking about like the classical, sounding piano and the brass horns with the New York jazzy feel to it and everything, that all starts to cover a different genre. And if I upload it in the correct genre, that's when I start to get the audience that I'm looking for, or the audience that likes that sound of music. Okay. I can use myself as an example. All right. Like for me, when I first started making music, I had a whole list of things that I was inspired by as a kid. I was like, oh, I want to take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of, and put it all together. Like, for example, I'd be like, I want to take some boom bop drums from hip hop, and I want to take like some house progressions, and I want to take some trance bass or like some techno bass, and I want to put all this stuff together. I want to add like these other little sounds here and there. And before I realized it, I was making new age music. Had no clue that back in the day I was making new age music. New age has always been there, but it's not something that's really been embraced. It's a very forgotten genre, which is sad to say. Even if you look up the Grammys, like everyone who's won a Grammy from the new age, like best new age album, had like maybe one track on their album that year, or like 3 or 5 tracks, and it was like 7 to 10 minutes long, and they got new age artist of the year or new age album of the year. Really weird. But looking at that, I started looking into what I was pulling, and what I was pulling was a bunch of stuff that's already there. So when I started to describe my music to people, this is what I was getting to about all the labels and stuff. When I started to describe my music to people, and people would ask me, oh, what kind of music do you make? I'd be like, oh, well, I take a little bit of jazz, a little bit of electronica, a little bit of house, all this stuff. But there's some ambient music, there's some worldly music, it's kind of chill out, it's kind of laid back, kind of like lounge type music, blah, blah, blah. I'm listing off all these ingredients to something where they're like, what the heck does that sound like? Can you give me an example of what it sounds like? Do other people make music with this many different sounds thrown together? Because that doesn't sound right. Everybody has their own precipitation of what certain genres sound like. Sorry if I say things weird. English is not my first language. So as they perceive certain sounds a certain way, they start to think of things a certain way. Whereas instead of giving them a list of all this stuff, piano, acoustic guitar, flute, harp, electronical instruments, Eastern instruments, all this stuff that's here. Instead of giving them this list, if I just say new age, they have a better understanding of what my music is. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because when you think about companies that have curated playlists like Pandora, Last FM, etc., when they put your music into a category for other music of similar types so that your music can be heard, it's being placed into a list of similar sounding music. You want your music to be in the right place to receive the right audience. And that goes for anywhere, to be honest, not just for Pandora and Last FM and etc. You want your music to be placed in an area where the people who like the sound of music that you create can find it. When I first started uploading my music, I had maybe 1-2 listeners a month. My music wasn't in the right place. When I started to reevaluate what my music is and where I pull my inspirations from and what does it sound like and what does it sound similar to, I discovered new age. There's different types of subgenres in new age. There's space music. There's bio music. There's progressive electronic. There's neoclassical. Neoclassical is also a type of music that I make. So when I started to see this, I was like, I'm a new age artist. And I shouldn't be afraid to say that. New age is forgotten about. And yeah, some people hate it. And some people use it for certain things like massage parlors and, elevator music. And, it is in a lot of video games too, but which is why I wanted to get my music into video games because I do make similar music to that. But for me, I'm not afraid to say I'm a new age artist because that's my base. That's where the music starts from, in my head, in my heart, in my soul. Whenever I think of music in my head, that's where it comes from. So for you, finding out where your music comes from, if you know this or if you don't, knowing what your music is categorized by, knowing what genre your music falls into, can help you improve your numbers. I mean, you do want to get paid for, your music. You want people to find value in your music. And the only way people are going to find value in your music is if it's put into the right place, right? You wouldn't want to create this, let's say, alternative rap sound, and then you perform it at a jazz festival, and there's no jazz at all. So why would you put your music there, right? Why would you perform there? You perform to a bunch of people that aren't interested in your type of music. They're there for jazz, not for alternative, right? So when you think about your revenue streams, you think about your royalties, you think about being discovered, you think about your audience, think about your genre first. Especially if you're a new artist or if you're a new producer or you're a new creative, look into what's going on behind the scenes. When you think about where you're pulling your chords from, for example, like earlier I mentioned a 2-5-5 and a 2-5-1 chord progression. Those are jazz chord progressions. Jazz chord progressions like the 2-5-5 and the 2-5-1 are usually used for lo-fi, and they're repeated over and over and over. I make a lot of hi-fi music because I refuse to use the low fidelity filters and sounds because it just hurts my ears the longer I listen to it with all the crackling and stuff. But I make a lot of hi-fi music. So for me, when I make hi-fi music, I now know where it comes from. I know what type of jazz chords to pull from. I know what type of classical sounds to pull from. I know where the influences came from and what the people who listen to and make lo-fi and hi-fi come from. You know, if you are a person who loves, let's say, Samurai Champloo, if you know what that is, if you don't, I advise you to look up this series. There was a record label that was going out of business, and they had a whole bunch of rap and lo-fi artists and producers that were making albums, but they weren't really making money. So what they decided to do was they're like, I'm going to make a whole animated series based off my artist music, and that's going to be our last ditch effort before we go bankrupt. And it was successful. Unfortunately, it was successful after they went bankrupt and after one of their main artists died. But they kind of sparked that whole love for lo-fi hip hop, you know, with and without lyrics. Because of that, I'm just using lo-fi as an example. Because of that, there were a lot more people like me and like other people who were introduced to lo-fi hip hop who love that sound, who love that style, whether there are lyrics or it's instrumental or even just the overall feel of it, the mood, the atmosphere. We love it because we were introduced to it by this awesome animated series that had this awesome music that went with the fight scenes, that had an awesome intro, all this stuff. Right? So they released their music into a different type of media that had a different audience that didn't know that they liked this type of music. So because of that, these artists and this record label became popular, right? Because they found the right audience. They found the audience they needed. Unfortunately, it was too late, but they found the right audience. So now those artists that were a part of that label, they still make music. You know, they now have more revenue coming in because people know who they are. They know their music. They know their sound. They know what they like. And that's what you want, right? At the end of the day, we all need our audience to listen to us, right? That's how we make our money off royalties. As little as it is, that's how we make our money off royalties. So knowing your genre will help you find your right audience. And I want to stress that, you know, whether you knew this or not, don't be afraid to label yourself. Don't be afraid to fall into a box, because that box is going to help you grow. It's going to help you know what your music is, who's listening to your music, why they're listening to your music, and how you can make more. How you can make more, how you can grow, how you can build on your sound, maybe your structure, your technique. Maybe you can pull inspiration from other areas. Maybe you can even stand out in that genre or transcend that genre and become what you want to be. You know, if you want to be a very specific genre and you're not in that genre at the moment, look at what you need to be in the genre that you want to be in. Or maybe you might like the genre you're in and you've been listing yourself in the wrong genre. Cool. So that's it for this video. Like I said, it's not going to be long, not going to be like an hour or something, but just wanted to pass that on. That's what this playlist is about. Me passing on information that I discovered through my own personal experiences. And if you have any questions, as always, leave a comment. I do respond to comments. YouTube just has a weird way of notifying you, if they even notifying you that people are commenting on your video, because honestly, I never got one notification in the past 3 months due to some like system that they changed in the background. I don't know, but I'm going to check my own videos personally and not rely on their notification system. So if you've been receiving replies from me this week, it's because I'm trying to find all of them. I think 3 months back is as far as it goes that I haven't responded to any comments. So yeah, this video came from one of those comments and a very common conversation that I have with a lot of people. I hope it really helped out. Sorry if my voice is too soft. I just have a deep voice. But I'm gonna try to make more videos like this. As always, that's the whole point of my channel, just to help other people with what I've learned, because it's hard to find this information, and no one really likes to tell you this stuff either for some reason. Or if they do, they're trying to do it to get you to sign up for their own like website or something, or distribution company, whatever. Anyway, I'll see you guys later. Do your research on your own genre, find out where you stand, and figure out how to stand out. We can all be like Tevin Campbell and stand out. I can't believe I use that as a reference. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.